What if I told you that on Mount Everest, the closer you are to a person in distress, the less likely you might be to save them? It sounds backward. In most places on Earth, proximity increases responsibility. You see someone fall, you help. You hear a cry, you move toward it. But above 8,000 meters, that logic collapses. Up there, every step costs oxygen you don't have. Every pause steals time you can't afford. And every good intention must be weighed against a simple, brutal question. Will helping them kill me too? Everest doesn't announce these decisions with drama. It presents them quietly, often just a few hundred feet from the summit, where climbers are weakest and hope is strongest. The mountain forces people into calculations they never imagined making. How much oxygen is left? How fast the weather is turning? How long the body can function before it shuts down? In that arithmetic, compassion becomes complicated. This isn't a story about heroes and villains. It's about ordinary human limits, exposed in the most extreme environment on the planet. About why bodies are sometimes left where they fall. About why rescue, so simple in theory, becomes nearly impossible in practice. And about how Everest turns closeness into danger. On Ben Stories, we don't rush these moments. We slow down and look at what the mountain demands and what it takes away. Because to understand Everest, you have to understand not just how people climb it, but why, sometimes, they walk past someone who is dying. 1. The summit's shadow. The immediate danger. Above 8,000 meters, the mountain enters what climbers call the death zone. It's not a metaphor. It's a physiological boundary where the human body begins to fail simply by existing. Oxygen levels drop to roughly a third of what they are at sea level. The body cannot acclimatize here. It can only endure, briefly. Every breath becomes shallow and inefficient. Muscles weaken. Judgment dulls. The brain, starved of oxygen, begins to misfire. Simple tasks, clipping a carabiner, adjusting a mask, taking a step, require full concentration. Mistakes don't come from panic. They come from exhaustion and subtle cognitive erosion. This is where high-altitude cerebral edema, HACE, begins to appear. Fluid leaks into the brain. The symptoms can look deceptively mild at first: confusion, clumsiness, an odd sense of calm. Climbers describe partners laughing at inappropriate moments, forgetting where they are, insisting they're fine when they clearly are not. Then the condition accelerates. Speech slurs. Balance disappears. Collapse follows. High-altitude pulmonary edema, HAPE, is just as unforgiving. Fluid fills the lungs. Breathing becomes labored, then desperate. Victims often feel as though they're drowning while standing upright. At sea level, both conditions are medical emergencies. On Everest, they are usually death sentences. What makes this especially cruel is where it happens. A significant percentage of Everest fatalities occur within a short distance of the summit, often less than an hour away. Not because the summit is more dangerous, but because it comes at the end of everything a climber has to give. Oxygen supplies are low. Energy reserves are depleted. Turnaround times are already blown. There is no margin left. This is why so many bodies lie along the upper routes, visible reminders of decisions made too late. Some were strong climbers who summited successfully and collapsed on the descent. Others never made it to the top, slowed by altitude sickness that worsened with every step upward. One of the most discussed cases is that of David Sharp in 2006. Sharp was an experienced climber attempting Everest solo. He was found sitting beneath a rock formation near the summit route, severely hypoxic and barely responsive. Over the course of that day, multiple climbers passed him. Some stopped briefly. Some spoke to him. None were able to mount a meaningful rescue. From a distance, the situation seems incomprehensible. Dozens of people walked by a dying man. But up close, in the death zone, the picture changes. Sharp was beyond self-rescue. He required oxygen, warmth, and immediate descent. To move him would have taken several strong climbers, each sacrificing their own oxygen and likely abandoning their summit bids. Even then, survival was uncertain. This is the paradox Everest creates. The closer you are, the more you understand how impossible the rescue truly is. Another example is Francis Arsentiev, who summited Everest in 1998 without supplemental oxygen, a remarkable achievement. On the descent, she collapsed near the summit ridge. For days, climbers encountered her, alive but incapacitated. Attempts to help were made. Oxygen was given. Efforts to move her failed. She died where she lay. Within sight of the path, others were still climbing. These cases are often framed as moral failures, but on Everest, morality collides with biology. At extreme altitude, strength is temporary. Coordination is fragile. Time works against everyone. A would-be rescuer is not standing on solid ground with full lungs and clear thinking. They are one misstep away from becoming the next body on the route. The death zone strips away illusion. It exposes the limits of human altruism, not because people stop caring, but because the environment punishes care with lethal efficiency. Up there, the mountain doesn't reward bravery. It enforces physics. And physics is indifferent to intention. 2. The unforgiving elements. Weather and terrain. If altitude weakens the body, weather finishes the job. On Everest, storms do not arrive gradually. They form with little warning, driven by jet stream shifts thousands of miles away. One moment, the sky is clear enough to reveal the curve of the Earth. The next, visibility collapses into a white void, where direction becomes guesswork and distance loses meaning. At high altitude, wind is the true enemy. Gusts exceeding 100 kilometers per hour are common near the summit. They don't simply knock climbers off balance. They strip heat from the body at a rate no clothing system can fully counter. Frostbite sets in within minutes. Exposed skin turns numb, then dead. Fingers stop working. Zippers can't be pulled. Masks freeze. Goggles ice over. In these conditions, stopping is often fatal. Yet rescue requires stopping, sometimes for hours. The terrain offers no mercy either. The upper slopes of Everest are a maze of hard blue ice, unstable snow slabs, and yawning crevasses hidden beneath fragile bridges. Fixed ropes provide a sense of order, but they also create bottlenecks. When traffic slows, climbers cool rapidly. When someone collapses on a narrow traverse, there is often no safe place to pass, let alone to stage a rescue. This is why distance on Everest is deceptive. A person may be only 50 meters away, but separated by vertical ice walls, exposed ridgelines, or sections where removing gloves to assist someone could cost you your fingers, or worse. In 1996, the mountain demonstrated how quickly weather can turn a difficult situation into a catastrophe. On May 10th, climbers from multiple expeditions were caught high on the mountain as a sudden storm moved in. Snowfall erased tracks. Wind disoriented even the most experienced guides. Radio communication broke down. As the storm intensified, climbers became scattered across the upper mountain. Some were near the summit. Others were descending. Many were within shouting distance of one another, yet effectively unreachable. Among them was Yasuko Namba, a climber attempting to complete the 7 summits. Exhausted and hypothermic, she collapsed during the descent. Guides found her alive but barely responsive. To move her would have required multiple people, in hurricane-force winds, well after safe turnaround times. They tried, for hours. Eventually, the decision was made to leave her behind to save others who still had a chance. She died overnight, less than a kilometer from safety. That same storm killed several climbers, strong, capable people, overtaken not by lack of skill, but by timing and weather. The mountain did not single anyone out. It simply removed options. Helicopters, often imagined as last-minute saviors, are usually useless at these altitudes. Above Camp 2, thin air severely limits lift capacity. High winds and poor visibility make flying suicidal. Even when conditions allow a brief approach, landing zones are scarce. Pilots can't hover while rescuers work. They touch down, load, and leave. Or they don't come at all. This is why rescue attempts on the upper mountain are so rare and so dangerous. Weather doesn't pause out of respect for human life. It accelerates the clock. On Everest, proximity does not equal accessibility. You can see someone, hear them, even speak to them, and still be powerless to help. Because once the weather turns, the mountain doesn't care how close you are. It only cares how fast you can move, and whether you can move at all. 3. The logistical nightmare. Resources and time. On Everest, rescue is not only a physical challenge, it is a logistical equation with no generous answers. Every climber above 8,000 meters is operating on borrowed resources. Oxygen bottles are counted and rationed long before summit day. Each one weighs several kilograms and provides only a few hours of support. There are no stockpiles waiting just beyond the next ridge. If you give your oxygen to someone else, you are giving away your own survival window. Medical supplies are minimal. A few medications for altitude illness, some dexamethasone, perhaps a portable hyperbaric bag, none of which are truly effective in the death zone. The only real treatment for severe altitude sickness is descent. And descent requires strength, coordination, and time. 3 things a critically ill climber no longer has. Movement itself becomes painfully slow. At sea level, a person can walk several kilometers in an hour. Near the summit of Everest, climbers measure progress in meters. A rescuer dragging or supporting another person might advance only a few steps before needing to stop, breathe, and recover. Each pause cools the body. Each delay burns oxygen. Time, more than anything, is the enemy. The concept of the golden hour in emergency medicine, the idea that rapid intervention can save a life, simply does not apply here. On Everest, that hour shrinks to minutes. Then it disappears entirely. A climber who collapses late in the day, with storms approaching and oxygen running low, may already be beyond help before anyone arrives. One of the most illustrative cases is that of Hannelore Schmatz, who died during her descent in 1979. Exhausted and unable to continue, she sat down near the South Col route and refused to move. Her companions pleaded with her, but they were nearing their own physical limits. Continuing to assist her would have meant spending the night in the death zone, a near certain death for all. They left her where she sat. For years afterward, her body remained visible to climbers ascending the route, a grim reminder of how quickly endurance can vanish. Attempts to recover her remains were repeatedly thwarted by weather and danger. Eventually, her body was lost over the Kangshung face during a later effort, claimed by the mountain itself. Financial cost also plays an unspoken role. High-altitude rescues can cost tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars, involving Sherpa teams risking their lives, specialized equipment, and coordination across multiple camps. Commercial expeditions now often carry rescue insurance, but money cannot buy favorable weather or restore oxygen to the air. More importantly, Rescue does not affect only the victim and the rescuer. It multiplies risk. Every additional person involved increases the chance that someone else will collapse. Everest history is filled with secondary fatalities, would-be rescuers who died trying to help someone already beyond saving. This reality forces decisions that appear cruel from afar. Climbers must assess not just can we help, but what will it cost? In oxygen, in time, in additional lives. The closer you are to the person in trouble, the clearer this calculation becomes. From base camp, rescue seems urgent and obvious. From 20 meters away, at 8,500 meters, with numb hands and a failing body, it looks very different. Everest doesn't allow idealism. It demands triage. And in that cold arithmetic, proximity becomes a liability.
For the moral quandary, sacrifice versus survival. Every climber who reaches the upper slopes of Everest carries an unspoken contract with themselves. It usually goes something like this: I know the risks. I accept them. What few fully anticipate is being forced to decide how much risk they are willing to accept for someone else. High on the mountain, the idea of a turnaround time governs everything. It is the moment when climbers must abandon the summit attempt, no matter how close they are, to ensure they can descend before darkness and weather close in. Miss it, and the mountain begins to collect payment. Rescue attempts collide head-on with this rule. Helping someone almost always means missing the turnaround time. It means descending later, slower, weaker. It means choosing uncertainty for yourself in exchange for a possibility, ever a guarantee of saving another. This is where the ethical weight becomes crushing. Climbers often describe these moments not as dramatic confrontations, but as quiet realizations. You look at your watch, you check your oxygen, you feel the cold creeping in, and you understand, with absolute clarity, that staying longer may mean no one makes it back. The public often asks why climbers don't simply work together, why groups can't pool resources and save everyone in distress. On Everest, coordination is rarely that simple. Expeditions operate independently. Oxygen systems are incompatible. Sherpa teams have obligations to their own clients, and at extreme altitude, communication breaks down not just by radio, but cognitively. There is also the human instinct to survive. In 2006, during the same season as David Sharp's death, climber Lincoln Hall collapsed near the summit, suffering from severe cerebral edema, believed to be beyond help. He was left overnight with a radio and a small amount of oxygen. The decision was agonizing, but consistent with the realities climbers had faced for decades. Against all expectations, Hall survived the night. He was found the next morning, alive but disoriented, and an extraordinary rescue was mounted. Multiple climbers abandoned their summit bids to assist him. Oxygen was shared, risks were taken. Hall eventually made it down alive. His survival is often cited as proof that climbers should never give up on one another. But what is less discussed is how exceptional the circumstances were. Improving weather, the presence of strong climbers with remaining oxygen, and sheer luck. For every Lincoln Hall, there are many others whose conditions were worse, whose timing was later, whose outcomes could not have changed. Those who walk past a dying climber do not forget it. Survivors carry these decisions for the rest of their lives. They replay moments endlessly, wondering if one more minute, one more bottle, one more push could have changed everything. But Everest offers no replay. The mountain forces a choice between two truths that cannot coexist: that every life is priceless, and that no one can be saved at any cost. To deny either is to misunderstand the environment entirely. Up there, morality is not abandoned. It is compressed in 2 seconds, into breaths, into the distance between one set of footprints and the next. And sometimes, the most ethical choice is the one that allows anyone to come home alive. 5. The lesson Everest leaves behind. Everest has a way of stripping stories down to their essentials. When the noise falls away, when the sponsorships, the summit photos, and the headlines fade, what remains is a simple truth about human limits. The mountain does not punish indifference. It punishes overreach. High above the clouds, there is no room for the instincts that guide us at sea level. Compassion still exists, but it operates within boundaries set by oxygen, weather, and time. On Everest, closeness does not equal control. Being nearby does not mean being capable, and sometimes, seeing someone suffer only clarifies how little can be done. This is why Bodhis remain on the route, not as symbols of cruelty, but as evidence of constraint. Each one marks a moment where physics outweighed intention, where survival required choosing not to act. Technology will improve, drones may scout routes, weather models will sharpen, rescue protocols will evolve, but the core equation will not change. Above 8,000 meters, the human body is temporary, decisions are final, and help, no matter how desperately wanted, has limits. Everest does not ask climbers to be heartless, it asks them to be realistic. It demands humility not just before the summit, but before the consequences of staying too long. This is the lesson the mountain teaches, again and again, at tremendous cost. On Everest, reaching the summit is optional. Coming back alive is not. If stories like this matter to you, stories that slow down, look closely, and respect the complexity of survival, this is what Ben Stories exists to do.